Your job is to give before you take. And the way we give is very specific. We don't tell people this is what you should do. This is what I've done and this is my experience or my result. So you can help them think through the process, but we don't ever want to come off as I'm super smart, you're super dumb, you need to do it this way. We all run our businesses differently. So it's how we give that feedback is really critical and important.
Yeah, and what works for you might not work for me and vice versa. Yeah, that's a really cool approach to take it. Welcome, entrepreneurs, to Pay or Quit,
where we reveal the gritty truth behind business success.
People see the glory, but not the struggle it takes to get there.
We're here to share the real stories of entrepreneurs navigating the tough intersection of business and relationships. I'm Tony Cline.
And I'm Shawn Johnson. And together we'll guide you through the real challenges faced as serial entrepreneurs.
Join us for the untold stories behind the scenes.
Buckle in, it might get messy. Big agenda today. So we've got three big topics that I'm super excited about. And it's funny, like all three of these are pretty close to my heart. So I'm stoked to hear about like your perspectives on these, Tony, because I know that you have like personal recent experience with some of this stuff too, which is really cool. So number one is some key recipes for a successful mastermind. I'm a huge fan of masterminds, so I'm super excited about that. 6 critical steps to effective one-on-one meetings. Company culture is one of my favorite things in business. Having that personal connection with your staff and your team beyond just business, I think is super critical for forming a strong culture. And so I'm super excited about that one as well. Of course, real estate investing, my on and on passion of life is, 5 ways you can get paid in real estate. So as an investor, let's preface that a little bit. So Tony, why don't you kick us off on successful masterminds? I know that, I'll get to that in just a second. I know that you just recently have formed, I don't know how recent, but months down the road, 2 really successful masterminds. And you've got people that are in your masterminds that I hear are raving fans. So tell us a little bit of like how you set that up and went about that and what these key components are of having great masterminds.
Yeah, sure. So Shawn, before I get into the way I've structured mine, let's go back and talk a little bit about actually the mastermind that you and I were in together and the way that was structured. And then we'll talk about how what I've rolled out in the recent months is different from that. And we can talk a little bit about the pros and cons of each. So you and I were in a mastermind together for, I don't know, a couple of years, maybe something like that. I don't know.
Probably 2 years, yeah.
It was a great time. A lot of great people in it. The way it was structured back then was we were just meeting on a regular basis, and we would meet over Zoom. I can't remember if we started on phones, but I think we started all with video conference. But it was sort of like, here's the time. We're going to dedicate this amount of time. I think it was an hour. Can't remember. Might have been 2. But whatever it was like, this is the time we're going to spend time together. There was no agenda really. It was just sort of what's going on in your world, what's going on in my world, how could we help each other? And it was sort of loosey-goosey, I guess. It was more of just a time to get with other entrepreneurs that shared some of the same challenges and some of the same goals that we had. And we were able to come together and I just kind of spend time and be in the same space together. So that was kind of what we did back then. I don't know if you remember anything or want to add anything to that that I left out.
I would just add that it did form that way. And I think in time, we recognized that we needed some more boundaries or structure to it. And I would start there, set the expectations from day one. When there's not clear expectations, it just kind of, like you said, is a little bit loosey-goosey and people show up when they want to, or maybe they don't even let you know they're not going to show up for the next scheduled mastermind. And I remember I liked the more loosey-goosey format in the sense that we didn't always have a topic to discuss, because we focused it on like, what are you currently struggling on that the rest of us maybe have some experience to help you with. And that provided like a brainstorming session that I
Mhm.
always really liked. So, I think there's a lot of aspects that I wish we would have structured earlier on, but there were some aspects that I was glad that it didn't get too overly structured, and that allowed for the movement of free information, if you will.
Yeah. I think in the beginning for me, I felt rejuvenated after the meetings because I got to spend time with people that were at that same level that I was at. Sometimes you can't talk to your spouse about things that's going on in the business. Sometimes you can't talk to your employees about things that are going on in the business. So it gave you this space to talk to somebody about what was going on. So I like that. And when it was over, I felt rejuvenated that I was able to spend time around people that had common goals, common interests. But looking back, I didn't always get value out of the content that we talked about, the things that we shared, because it wasn't show up, be prepared, have something on your agenda that you're going to talk about, have a need, figure out how to get feedback, how to provide feedback. So, what I've learned through just being in multiple masterminds and hosting other masterminds and now having my own masterminds for clients is that you do have to be really clear on what the expectations are from all parties and then create those boundaries. I think people like having those boundaries of this is what the mastermind is for. This is the agenda. This is how frequent it is. There's an expectation that you show up. It's not, if I'm not doing anything else, I come and show up. It's no, this is a priority. You schedule things around this.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Now we wrote down some really some bullet points as to kind of get a structure here going. So why don't you guide us through that a little bit, Tony, of like your experience of running these masterminds?
Yeah, so I think the first one just starts really with the basics. It's just having clear and common goals. And I've been in some masterminds that are industry specific. I've been in other masterminds that are not industry specific, but it's just getting really clear on what's the purpose and the goal of this mastermind 90 days from now, 120 days, 2 years, whatever. What does success look like? Because what I did learn was it's fun to come and hang out with people that can commiserate with you or that you can share your successes with. But if that's all it is, if there's no growth that happens because of it, it's kind of like going to the bar on Friday night. Like it might be fun, might feel good, but you wake up the next day and you didn't really benefit you in any positive way.
Yeah, it's interesting as I get older and a little bit more I don't know, gray, if you will. I'm super protective of my time. And we put so much effort into running successful businesses or being good fathers, being good husbands, wives, that if you're going to go spend time and just kind of shoot the breeze a little bit, it's a total, in my opinion, it's a waste of time. And so like it should be like your clear and common goals. Well, that kind of sets the tone and the foundation of the culture that you're going to have within this mastermind. And so like if it is the goal to go shoot the breeze, if you will, fine, be content with that. But it never was mine. I wanted to walk away with some clear objectives. How can I always had like this notepad that, oh my gosh, I've got 5 things I need to correct in my business. And that was like the next 2 weeks I'd focus on those things and then I would go deliver, And so, good point on the clear and common goals. I think that sets the tone of where you can take the mastermind.
Yeah. And then the next thing that once you kind of have that foundation, that framework of what success is going to look like, what you're striving to accomplish with that, the next thing that you really need to get clear on is the people that you bring into the mastermind or the people that you're in a mastermind with. You're going to wind up getting super vulnerable with these people and sharing what's really going on in your life and in your business, because if you don't, it's a waste of time.
Mhm.
And so you've got to get really comfortable with, I'm building relationships that I'm going to share things probably with these people that I'm not sharing with anybody else. And if you're not comfortable with doing that, either in general or with the people that are in your mastermind, you're probably in the wrong mastermind. And to take that a step further, it's it's going to be awkward when you first join a mastermind if you don't know the people that are there. Either you're bringing new people together or you're joining one where it's already been going. You just have to be okay with that feeling of awkwardness and being uncomfortable because everybody's kind of feeling out like, I'll show you mine if you show me yours kind of thing. But, it's somebody has to go first. Somebody has to be vulnerable. Somebody has to say, things aren't great in my business. This is something I'm struggling with. I need help. And once you start doing that, you start building these tight relationships where everybody is cheering for one another and pulling for each other to succeed.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you said that, I have two examples that are on the polar opposites. In the mastermind that we were in together in property management, we had one of our members that was not transparent, and he actually put some walls up. And it was funny because it actually caused the rest of us in the mastermind to actually put walls up too, because if he's not being vulnerable with us, is there a reason? Why should we share our kind of intimate experiences in business, if you will, with him if he's not willing to share it with us? So that kind of happened, and we recognized, and we actually confronted the issue head on. I remember we had a conversation like, hey, the point of this, our common goal here is to be transparent, is to be vulnerable, so we can be most effective in what we share. And then I had another experience that was the extreme opposite. It was a brand new mastermind, first day attendees. I was in it, and it's kind of this round robin format at first, and I went vulnerable and deep way early on, way before everybody was wanting that, I think. And I think it kind of caused whoa, this is how this is going to be. I'm not sure I want to share this kind of stuff. And it kind of weeded some folks out early. I didn't continue on in that mastermind, but it was funny how those two polar opposites really, triggered my thought when you just mentioned that. But relationships are the key here. What do you want to get? And it's funny because our relationship in our mastermind built so deeply. I have deep friendships because of that mastermind, and that I could pick up the phone at any time and say, hey man, I'm going through this, and have a conversation. They pick up the phone because I'm calling, you know what I mean? There's some deep relationships from the mastermind, deep friendships.
Yeah. Yeah. And so in order to keep those friendships going, I think it's important that it becomes a meeting where there's a purpose, there's vulnerability, and then there's follow-up. So let's talk a little bit about, we have a great mastermind meeting, and then what? Then a month goes by, 2 months, 6 months, a week. The frequency of the meeting really matters, and everybody has to be on the same page for that, because we all have busy schedules. But if one person wants to meet weekly and the other person or somebody else in the mastermind wants to meet monthly, there's a disconnect there. And so how do we get everybody on the same page? Maybe we don't. Maybe we have to replace members. But at the end of the day, everybody that's in that mastermind has to be on the same page about the frequency. You can't have somebody that shows up weekly, if you're doing it weekly, and then somebody else in the mastermind only shows up every other week.
Yeah, I would equate that back to accountability. I think if the common goals here to actually achieve growth and to improve the business, then I think a really strong point of having a great mastermind is having the other members keep you accountable while you're keeping the other members accountable. And so therefore I ask the question, well, how frequent should we have this mastermind? Well, I would say it's as frequent as it can keep you accountable to the tasks that we came away with from our last mastermind. So if, for instance, we said, we're going to do X, Y, and Z as a result of our previous mastermind, and we need to figure out how long it takes me to actually implement X, Y, and Z. That's the frequency. Now, I don't want that to be willy-nilly though, because like X, Y, and Z might take longer than BDQ. And I don't want a 2-week for X, Y, and Z and then a month for BDQ. That doesn't work out. I think it has to be a recency and a reoccurring frequency. So we found a cadence in that first mastermind I was in and I think it landed on every other week. That worked out well for us. So maybe you only walk away with 2 objectives to accomplish, but you need to accomplish those objectives before the next meeting. And then we kept each other accountable. I probably had the most growth because like there's that 3% rule in life. They say you're here as a person, but you want to be way up here in the future, but you don't take the leap from here to there. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's the 3%. I'm going to be a 3% better person tomorrow than I was the day before. I'll be a 3% better person of the day before than and so on. And tomorrow, the day before I was. And that just keeps building so you can eventually get there. I would say don't get overwhelmed with the tasks, if you will. Figure out what the cadence is. How do we keep each other accountable to that cadence? And I think that naturally sets the frequency. But my recommendation would be to never go beyond a month. Well, that's not true. You could probably do every other month and be successful with it. But I think too much more than that, it falls by the wayside. There's no sense of urgency. I'm not really trying to strive for improving at that point. I think beyond that, it just seems a little too loose, in my opinion. That's just me for my personal preference.
The only way I could see something beyond that monthly working is that you wind up having some accountability partners for specific things that you're working on, and you're having communications with that one-on-one, and you might have 2 or 3 different accountability partners for different aspects of whatever project you're working on, and you're getting deep and getting some accountability and some mentorship or whatever with people outside of the mastermind, and then you're coming back and everybody's reporting it. But they can't be really no progress or no contact for weeks or months at a time. It's just, it will fizzle out.
Yeah.
Okay, so after we've figured out our common goals that are clear and common goals, we've gone deep with the relationships, we've established how frequent our meetings need to be, we've established some accountability. What does it mean to be a contributing member? What's it look like to be kicked out? This is something that we kind of struggled with because we had some issues that came up where we weren't sure how to address it. And now we're making it up on the fly. So what we've done now for our masterminds is we actually have a list of these are the policies around the mastermind. And that way it's not me kicking somebody out or me being mean about something. This is the policies of the mastermind. This is, if you miss this many meetings, then we are going to replace you. We're realistic. We know that life happens. So it's not like you miss one and you're out, but the frequency of your attendance matters, your contribution matters. And what are the policies around that you're going to hold people accountable to? And then we share that so that everybody's on the same page of here's what the expectations are. Because I think we did a disservice to some of the members of our initial mastermind, which was we weren't clear. We thought we were clear, but looking back, I don't really think we were that clear of what was expected, what your level of contribution needed to be, what you could hold back and not share with the group, and what, if you had something to contribute to elevate others. I had the expectation that you help them, where not everybody in our mastermind, I think, had that same philosophy. So getting really clear on the accountability piece. And then the next step is to set the expectations of how we're going to go about helping everybody. So when you mentioned early on, what am I doing now with my 2 mastermind groups that I run? And we have a very set agenda. And so if you'd like, I can share that with you and we can go over how it's
Yeah.
different than what you and I rolled out.
Yeah, I would love to hear that. Yeah, because I'm definitely open to learning different. I'm in a mastermind now that's not too structured, but it's been great.
Yeah. So, and there's pros and cons to both, right? So I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but it is about setting the expectation of what am I getting into? And so we open the meeting where everybody goes around, um, and we still do the introduction of their name and the company, even though we've been meeting for a while. They still, I just want that to be like, that's the icebreaker. Everybody talks once around, right? So we go around that, and then we go back around and we ask what was their commitment from 2 weeks ago, because we're meeting every other week as well. And so we ask, what was your commitment? And we actually have their commitments documented. So they just kind of restate what their commitment was from last week. Did they, or from the last meeting, did they meet that? And if so, what are they most proud of, or what was an aha moment that they figured out? If they didn't meet it, why? And what can the group do to help them make sure that they meet it? So we go around the room that way. So it's really clear of right up front, there's the accountability piece. Look, you talked about, you made a public commitment in the group 2 weeks ago that this is what you were going to work on. Did you do that? And then from there, we have a quick 10-minute training topic where somebody in the group is coming and specifically training and educating everybody else on some specific topic of their choice that fits within the framework of what the mastermind is about. And then we have a 15-minute, what we'll call the hot seat, or what we call the study session. I prefer study session. Hot seat's a little bit like, we're going to throw rocks at you. Yeah. So we go through that. Well, you get 15 minutes to present a problem or an opportunity that you're currently faced with, or have the opportunity to take advantage of. And that's a very structured way that we ask you to present that. So we have about 6 steps that we walk through during that 15 minutes. And then we turn it over to the rest of the group for 10 minutes to give you feedback and to commit to sharing different resources. And then after that, we go back around and the group commits to what they're going to work on the next 2 weeks. And then we do a little bit of a closing. And that takes right at about 55 minutes for us to do that. So there's a little bit of fluff, 5 minutes one way or the other, but we keep it on that schedule. And we're finding that people are getting maximum value because they know I'm showing up, I'm prepared to either be in the hot seat, deliver my study session, or I'm showing up specifically to give advice or experience of what has worked for us in the past to the specific member that gets the spotlight. But everybody also goes around and shares what they committed to. So there's the accountability piece. And then they get to, and when we close it, they say, what are they working on the next 2 weeks? And how can the group help them? That's the second component of, I'm working on X and I could use this help from the group. And then during the 2 weeks that we're off, there's offline conversation happening through our community that we have set up for that.
That's awesome. Do you limit the amount of members that you'll, because I think it could get very timely if you have too many people.
Yeah, we do. The top is 8 that I have. And the reason that we started out, when we started the groups, we started with 10, knowing that 20% probably just won't be a good fit. Mm-hmm. And so we started with 10. Really, 8 is kind of the max. If you go beyond that, like you said, it's tough for everybody to get their time in. I actually really like the number 6 for the masterminds. And then when you get down to 4, it's like, okay, I think we need to bring in another voice, or be looking for who are recruiting to bring in somebody else.
Yeah, interesting. That's kind of where we landed on our first mastermind together, was 8. I think it dipped a little bit there, and we're like, let's fill the other seats as soon as we could too, because it felt like we were hearing some repetitiveness, but not really some growth, like we weren't getting the growth. And there was a magical number in there. So I really like that. You also hinted on something that I thought was super important that was on our list, was the members' willingness to help others in the group succeed. There's something about that collaboration factor that just seems like it snowballs the effect so well. And I love how you guys follow up on how are we going to help you achieve your objectives for the next meeting. That's super cool. Have you seen any success stories because of that factor that you could share?
Put me on the spot. I don't know that there's any publicly that I can share outside of just the fact that people are working on specific issues and other members of the group actually have expertise and they're making commitments. So it's not just here's what I'm have going on and I help you during this meeting, but then there's nothing out. They're committing and doing follow-up for those things that they talk about. One of the things that you mentioned that I want to circle back to, it's on our list here is number 6, which is the members have to be dedicated to helping each other's in the group. And that was part of the culture we created, is your job is to give before you take. And the way we give is very specific. We don't tell people this is what you should do. It's this is what I've done and this is my experience or my result. And if you can't frame it like that, then you also ask, well, have you tried this? Have you tried to do this and what was the result? So you can help them think through the process, but we don't ever want to come off as we're going to tell you, I'm super smart, you're super dumb, you need to do it this way, because we all run our businesses differently. So it's how we give that feedback is really critical and important as well.
Yeah, and what works for you might not work for me, and vice versa. Yeah, that's a really cool approach to take it. Tony, that's exciting stuff for Masterminds. Congratulations on your success on your 2 Masterminds there, and again, I've heard great things about them. So kudos. And I think it's because I'm in your cool community, so I feel special. So it's pretty cool to see that. So let's shift gears here. So our next agenda item here is 6 critical steps to effective one-on-one meetings. I think at Home Vault, we weren't doing one-on-ones as a company, individual companies. I was such a huge fan of one-on-ones at Independence Capital. Saw huge success. And what I actually saw was, the result of those were lower turnover, higher performance. People were getting heard. And then you didn't get that silent quitting effect. Mm-hmm. I'm quitting, but I just haven't quit yet, because you can keep them, abreast of what's going on in the business. They keep you abreast. And so anyway, I just wanted to kick it off with those thoughts, because I've just seen so many cool successes from one-on-ones that have been so pivotal on good, strong company cultures for myself.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about what a one-on-one is, because I think there's some misunderstandings about what it actually is. A lot of times business owners, when they hear, and it's a kind of a buzzword over the last, 2-3 years, people are like, are you doing your one-on-ones? It's like, well, I don't even know what that is. What is it? So let's get clear and define what the one-on-one is, and then what the purpose of it is and who it's actually for. So when you are holding a one-on-one with somebody, what is actually the purpose of that meeting? And is it you asking questions about projects, or what does that look like? So share with our audience what that means.
Yeah, the way that I've had them be most successful, I've really played around this for 10 years of experience here. But to me, it's not a one-on-one is not me in passing, going and sticking my head in someone's office and seeing how their day is and so on. Although that is important, check on how their life is, how their family is. If, their husband or spouse just got out of surgery, those things are obviously the human thing to do, but that's not a one-on-one. A one-on-one to me is a specific time and place that we are going to meet. We're going to chat. we don't necessarily have a set agenda, but the agenda is really geared towards the superior having time so that the inferior employee, the subordinate, can voice anything, voice any concerns, talk about anything that's going on, whether it's personal or professional. And it usually lands professional. I mean, we're in a business setting, but it should allow the freedom to talk about personal things if needed as well. They should have the ability to feel transparent or vulnerable and not be chastised for that. It shouldn't, this should be like a carve out in the job place of performance where they're not going to be held negatively if they said something in the one-on-one. So that's kind of my viewpoint. Cadence is super important to me. It should be done on a regular basis. I'm a huge fan of weekly one-on-ones that are about 15 to 20 minutes. I like 15 minutes of the heart of it, and then I like 5 minutes of free conversation and a recap. I always like to recap. So that's kind of how I view one-on-ones, and those are the ones that have been super successful for me. Like, there's a regular schedule. We're going to keep each other accountable. You don't want to just not show up. If something comes up, that's cool. That's life, right? Just tell the other person, hey, I'm going to miss our one-on-one this week. I'm so sorry, but I will be at the next one, our next week's meeting. So hopefully that defines it. Tony, you got anything to add that I'm missing there?
Yeah, well, I just have a question, maybe some clarity for the audience, because the way that I ran one-on-ones was a little bit different than what you had just mentioned. So I did like to try to keep them just to that 15 minutes. So you said the 15 minutes and then 5 minutes of like free conversation. But for me, when I was doing it, I was keeping it to just 15 minutes of free conversation. I kind of positioned it. I think you took the same approach, but it's their time to talk about whatever they want. And in the beginning, it can be a little bit tough to get them to talk about issues that they're having, whether it's at work or at home or whatever. But this is probably anecdotal, so it's not that you could build a system around this. But one of the best one-on-ones I had was one of our employees was dealing with quite a bit of stress on the job, but there was just something just extra about this meeting, and I could just see the glossy eyes and stuff. And so we started digging into it, and as we dug into it, there was some personal stuff that was going on, and there was a pet that was involved that was sick, and some decisions that were needing to be made. And yeah, that's a personal thing, but it was affecting work performance, because it's just hard to separate when your brain is suffering from something. You can't just close the door. Maybe some people can. I certainly can't. So it spilled over. So we talked through some of that. And even though I wasn't able to offer any solutions, it was just a chance to kind of talk through, this is what's going on in my life, and this is what's going on at work. And once we kind of got that out, then it was like, okay, well, now that I've shared that, here's also some things that are going on at the job. And we gave a couple of recommendations, and it was a really productive meeting. But if we didn't have that openness, we never would have got to that open conversation. So what is the difference between what you mentioned about the 15 minutes and then the 5 minutes of free conversation versus my approach of just 15 minutes of what's on your mind? How do we make your life better? How do we make your position better and your performance better, and then let them take the role?
No, I'm glad you said that, because I actually misspoke. What I meant by I think they were best intended when it's free speak for that bulk, that 15 minutes. I should have just said that I leave 5 minutes for a recap. Like, this is what we spoke about. I acknowledge that you're going through X, Y, and Z here, and then leave a little bit of time of like, this is the takeaways, the objectives that we need to accomplish. If there's not always objectives, but if there are any objectives, this is what we're going to keep each other accountable for to accomplish before the next meeting. So yeah, the free speaking is really the bulk of it. I always like I like to gear up with some specific questions before we do it and then allow them to do the talking. I think
Mhm.
like a specific question would be, how are you and your colleagues getting along right now? Um, are you having any difficulties with the colleagues that you work with? Those types of things. Just leading questions, open ended, no yes or no type of questions or answers, and then allow them to speak. I really am a big believer they should speak about 80 to 90% of the time, and you should only speak about 10%. Now, I also am not a huge fan of making these one-on-ones tend to turn into working meetings. That is not the
Mm.
point. If you turn them into working meetings, you have missed the entire point of having a one-on-one with your team. So avoid that at all costs. Now you might have one or two that lands that way. If the team member comes to you and says, "Hey, I've got a few things that I just need to ask you about," let them ask you because that was important to them to ask. But try to avoid turning them into a working meeting.
Yeah. So one of the areas where I think, looking back when we had Home Vault, one of the things I think we could have done a better job of is we would listen in these one-on-ones. We would come up with areas that they would bring to our attention that needed to be improved. And then there was a lack of follow through on our part. Not all the time, but we were making a lot of changes. We were growing, we were expanding in different markets. We were doing all of this stuff. There was a lot of things happening all at once. We were moving people from the front lines and putting them into management positions and then hiring new people for the front lines. There was just a lot of stuff that was going on. And we would get some feedback during those one-on-ones where we didn't. I think we could have done a better job of doing the follow through and keeping our commitments. And I think that's one area where, looking back, I can see where one-on-ones can actually turn against you and your company if you're asking for feedback and the people are vulnerable enough to say, "This is what I need to make your company better, to make me perform better in your company," and then you don't do anything about it. It can actually backfire, I think, a little bit. You got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think if somebody's willing to put their neck out there, if you will, and say something like that, and then you don't take the feedback to some level of follow through, then absolutely it will really hurt the company as a whole. What I would say to that is like if you don't have the power to change one of the complaints or something that has been brought up, then at least follow through and say, "Hey, I've discussed this with the other leadership or whoever, and we've decided that your feedback is completely valid, but we're going to go this route because of this reason, because it's better for the company or whatever the case may be." But to ignore it and not say anything actually becomes like a festering cancer within that one-on-one. They will stop being vulnerable, and you won't actually see improvement. It'll actually be a detriment of time at that point.
Yeah.
And you're probably going to lose an employee eventually. They'll be, again, slow quitting. So the follow
Yeah.
through is super important.
All right. So before we switch gears and go to our next topic, I want to throw this out, and then we can wrap this one up and move on to the next topic. But one of the things that I've worked on with my clients is getting really clear with providing the feedback loop.
Mhm.
And this applies not just in a one-on-one, but across your company. When you have a policy or a process or something that they want to give you feedback on, having one official way to get that feedback and to deliver feedback about their feedback. And so it's having what we call the official feedback loop. We don't want to say, sometimes you email me when you got some feedback, sometimes you put it in Slack, sometimes we discuss it in the one-on-one. Like, all of those areas can be things where conversations start, but we need to have one place where we gave you feedback about this suggestion, and then is it being considered? Is it in action? Is it implemented? Or is it tabled? Is it never going to be adopted? But just giving people that area for feedback is going to help them adopt the culture where I want to share more about how to make this company better because I actually get to see what's going on with my feedback. And then we have an official feedback loop of this is what we're doing with the feedback that you've given us. So that's not a topic for today, but it ties into giving feedback in the one-on-one. So maybe we can dive a little deeper into that on another episode.
Yeah, let me tie that into a one-on-one a little bit. Whether the feedback loop happens that you've designated for the one-on-one or not. What I would recommend for a one-on-one is to keep a running note of the actual topics that are discussed in the one-on-one. And then share that with the team member that you're conducting the one-on-one with. It allows you to keep a history. It allows you to keep a certain amount of accountability, if you will. And when there are things that you actually have a task that is derived from the one-on-one, then it keeps here's a task list and we're going to accomplish this, or you're going to accomplish it, or I'm going to accomplish it. And it shows that those things are being done. As a leader, if a task comes and it's been assigned to you to accomplish it and you don't accomplish it, it gets put off, you are showing that team member that you really don't care. You don't care enough to go take that step that you both decided in a one-on-one meeting that something needs to happen, right? Some objective or a task has been derived from it. So keep that running list. I keep one singular document that's attached to my calendar appointment. That's Google Docs, allows you to do that. And then I date, every date of a one-on-one is a chapter in my running list. So I could always revert back to, and then I give a little synopsis of the main topics in that outline. So it's easy reference because, you'll do these for months and months and months. There's 4 of them in every month. That's a lot of information, and I'm taking notes. Now, I would say that when you're taking notes, still stay focused on your team member. Don't divert and take the notes. What I usually do is say, I'm going to jot a little thing down, and at the end of it, after we've wrapped up and we've departed, I take 5 to 10 minutes to then synopsis or summarize what we talked about, what we need to do, and assign tasks as needed.
All right, I know there's more that we could add to that, but I think people are getting the picture of how to conduct a good one-on-one. So let's switch gears. Let's start talking about investing in real estate. I know that's a topic that you could give seminars on and are very in tune with. So let's jump into that. Let's just kind of talk about, let's summarize, what are the 5 ways that you can get paid by owning real estate? And is this specifically for people who are in property management, or is this for just anybody in general?
Yeah, I would say it's anybody in general. And why is it important for a property manager? Well, or a real estate professional, let's just say. I don't know what the percentage is, but I'm guessing that the percentage is really high of real estate professionals that don't own rental property, and yet they manage or sell property for investors, and they see their investors just building wealth, and you're not getting a piece of the real opportunity here. So that's why I bring it up. I think it's important. Like, as a self-employed person, look, I didn't get a 401k unless I had the money to go do the 401k, right? Or there's no health insurance plan that I can get I can, but you know what I mean? Like, those things weren't instituted until I was very intentional about them. So rental properties, great way to build a nest egg. So first and foremost, obviously, we're managing real estate as property managers for an investor, and cash flow is what they are trying to achieve, right? The cash flow is all the expense, the top line revenue, rent, all the expenses, and then what's left over is the cash flow. So that's number 1. Number 2, I think that, there's a lot of real estate plays that try to go after the appreciation of a property, but appreciation, in my opinion, especially in volatile markets, is not guaranteed. It's higher risk. And over the course of, since the 80s, we've seen about a 2 to 3% appreciation year over year on property. That means that, you're going to have to hold that property longer to gain, more profit, if you will, or more money from the property. But appreciation is probably objective number 2 that you can gain. Denver is one of the highest rent places, but they've also seen the appreciation of properties higher than, I think they make the list almost every year of like one of the highest appreciation markets that there is. It's been far beyond 2 or 3%. It's interesting. And
Yeah.
then
We had an owner one time that was complaining about some maintenance costs, and we needed to put in a new furnace and stuff like that. And he's like, "You guys are always coming to me with all these expenses." And so I offered him I made him a proposal. He ultimately didn't accept, but I said, "I'll cover half of your maintenance expenses if I get half of your appreciation over the last 3 years we've managed the property." And he wouldn't take me up on that because, I mean, there's cash flow you look at, but in a hot market like Denver, I mean, we were probably talking about $300,000 over those 3 years.
yeah, you'd be happy to replace the refrigerator at 50%, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that'd be right up my alley.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that. The next one, loan pay down. Obviously, you got the house rented. You're not the one actually paying the mortgage. The resident or the tenant is paying the mortgage. That's the next way. I love this. I like to leverage my rental properties, and I won't talk about the specifics there, but I leverage them in the sense that that money is tax free, and somebody else is paying down the mortgage for me. And so you make money in real estate by somebody else paying down the mortgage. So if you ever go to sell it or refinance it, you now get that delta, right? Tax benefits so this is the fourth way. Tax benefits are pretty large portion. Mortgage interest deduction. We all know that as home buyers that you get a mortgage interest deduction. It's not a big deduction, but you actually get to deduct your interest that you've paid. And then probably the ones that hit home more for us as property managers are the cost segregation studies that allows you to depreciate the portions of the property, of the real property, not the land, but the real property, like the refrigerator, the HVAC, if it's furnished, the furniture, and depreciate that so you can actually take the tax benefit of that, those assets within the home. That could be a very substantial way to save taxes and therefore make money. Another one is the real estate professionals designation. I think they moved up the requirements like 750 hours per year. Don't quote me on that number, but if you put in 750 hours or more a year, you could take a real estate professionals deduction, and it takes your capital gains tax liability substantially down from what it would be just as a cash flow perspective, or a capital gains, if you will. So look into that. Talk to your CPA. That's a really fantastic way to make money at real estate. And last but not least, I think most investors don't even think about this one, is inflation profit or inflation hedge. Inflation, as we know, this has been a hot topic in the last couple of years because we saw inflation almost 9%. It's probably higher than that since Congress got a 20% raise. I don't know, but they reported in, and then they have a really hard time knowing what true inflation is. There's just so many variables to it, but they were reporting almost 9%. Rental rates over the course of time have increased 40%. So you see a lot higher increase in rental rates. It stays far above the inflationary rate. And so therefore it makes a good hedge against inflation. So if I was to go purchase stocks in lieu of real estate, it would actually drag along with inflation because the company has the same inflationary factors, that I'm buying stocks in that I do, or the dollar does in inflation. Real estate in this example, and because of rent increases, hedges against inflation really well. And I think people forget about that. So it's one of my favorite things. Like if I'm thinking about, so for instance, let me give a real world example. Company wants to purchase your business, and they, instead of paying all of the purchase price in cash, they want to pay in an annuity or a loan, an owner finance for a period of time. And your negotiation would say, well, if you're going to do that, I'm not going to allow you to do that at 0% because my money over time is losing the inflationary rate, call it 8%. And so my $100,000 is now only $92,000 in a year and down and down. So I'm going to charge you a interest rate. But that would just probably match it because you would have an interest rate of 8%. Inflation's 8%. You're not even gaining, right? You're just breaking even on inflation. So real estate, in my opinion, those raise rents. I'm just a huge advocate of like your tenant should expect a rent raise annually. That's a guarantee or a promise that you will give them. Hey, you got a nice place, I'm going to raise the rent. You know what I mean? So, and it helps you hedge against the inflation.
Yeah. So there's two things that I think of when I listen to you go through that list. So the first thing is, we as property managers, even if we're not the owner of the business, we come across opportunities in our portfolio all the time. So we should be evaluating, is this a good property for me to try to figure out some creative financing around? Is there some way for me to when that landlord is ready to move on from that property, how can I make it a win-win where I get to participate and purchase that property? And I know you and I have talked a lot about how to do that. And I'd love to have a session where we go through just that. But there's two things. The first one is, how do we as property management or real estate professionals take advantage of the position we're in where we have access to all of this information and all of these deals? And of course, we want to do right by our client. Obviously, that should go without saying, but I still want to say it. So we want to do right by our client, but we're still put in a position where we can take advantage of the opportunities that a lot of the public doesn't get first crack at. The second thing, though, that is important that I want to touch on is a lot of these things seem like pretty simple concepts, talking about cash flow, talking about appreciation, talking about loan pay down. But those who are not necessarily real estate professionals, or they're just beginning as an investor going down their investor journey, these are great topics to help you create content around to elevate your status as an authority in your marketplace. And they become differentiators. If you're talking about things at whatever level, you'll have the true investor that's trying to buy 50 units or 100 units or whatever. And you have the person that's got one unit that they got accidentally or through, used to be grandma's old place or whatever. How do I kind of see the vision? How do I build a portfolio of 5 or 10? And so by creating content around this, you become an expert in their eyes. What you talk about is making it through the filter of just the noise that's out there from your competition. And it becomes a differentiator for, now I'm talking about things that are important to that particular client. So they're making their decision on property management companies more than just, what do you charge? What are your fees? Because that's all they know how to differentiate us until we give them something else to differentiate us by.
Yeah, I'll make one point to that. I think the point you're making here is one of the things that separates the property managers that are an line item expense on the investor's cash flow statement versus the property managers that are an asset on the investor's cash flow statement.
Yeah. All right, good stuff. I do want to, we have to make a commitment. So I'm going to hold you to it at some point, not today, but where we actually put together a presentation where we can get deep into each one of those topics, because I know you've got a wealth of knowledge on each one of those bullet points and going deep. And I think there's a lot of people out there that have big opportunities, but don't really know how to move forward to take advantage of those opportunities that are in front of them. So let's circle back around to that topic here soon.
Love to do it. So let's keep it a wrap here, Tony. Cheers.
All right.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next time to cut through the noise of what it really takes to be a successful entrepreneur.
If today's episode hit home, share it with a friend, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one.